All right. Hello, and welcome back to the Thought Cloud podcast. Our goal with this conversation is to uncover a hidden gem that can inspire others along their academic journey. Our guest today is Gitika Gorthi. Gitika is going to be an undergraduate at Columbia University in the fall, where she will be studying in the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences as a C. Prescott Davis Scholar. That is something we will learn more about shortly. Some of her awards in her time during high school include being the 2022 Young Woman of Distinction Gold Award recipient from the Girl Scouts of the USA. She was a part of the Math Honor Society, Science Honor Society, National Honor Society, and she was a Coca-Cola Scholar in the year 2022, which is a huge accomplishment. If you haven't heard of the Coca-Cola Scholarship, you should definitely check that out. Very, very high-level scholarship. She was just recently a speaker at the National Space Society International Space Development Conference and the Humans to Mars Summit. Gitika was also just named the top 100 women to follow in aerospace and aviation on LinkedIn, which is a huge accomplishment as someone who is only 18. Unbelievable. One of her biggest life goals is to be the first doctor on Mars, and I'm so excited to hear more about that. Gitika, thank you so much for coming on and telling us a little bit about your story. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the kind introduction. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's jump into it. So when and how did you first get interested in space? When did this whole thing start for you? Because it was at a young age.
Yeah, so I get this question all the time, and I'm a strong believer that every kid has a fascination for space as a young kid. I was like everybody else. I questioned myself, like why the moon seemed to be following me everywhere, or like what was gravity? What did that mean? Like why was everything falling down? And I was just always just curious about the world around me, like every other kid. I was a huge believer that there's aliens outside, out in the world. I used to watch Star Wars, watch Star Trek, and I got really into like science fiction and space in general. And living near DC was very convenient because there's an Air and Space Museum kind of like 30 minutes away from my house. So I used to go there all the time with my family. And it really sparked my interest and curiosity for space at a very young age, like maybe first and second grade. But I never ever thought of space as a real career. And this is probably because like neither of my parents were in the aerospace industry. And I just thought like you had to be like a very smart person, like you do like Albert Einstein or like a physicist to be a part of the space industry. So I didn't think it was possible for me. So I never really considered it a real career. I did, on the other hand, have a lot of my family members interested in STEM and biology and medicine. And with my curiosity also on the human body and how things work internally, I was like very drawn to medicine and biology at a young age. And so I kind of had these two interests, but I thought medicine was kind of my future because that seemed more attainable for me. And going into middle school, I took a tech ed class. Like most middle schoolers, they have an elective that they can take. And so I took mine as engineering design, which was tech ed. And there was a unit on rocketry. And my tech ed teacher, Mr. Anderson, he noticed my curiosity for rocketry and space and building. And he was like, Gitika, why don't you join my after school rocketry club? And I was initially very, like scared, but also excited, like, oh my God, I get to build my own rocket. And so I joined the club kind of hesitant, not knowing if I could build a rocket. And I quickly proved myself wrong and realized that I loved model rocketry and I love space in general. And that club gave me the confidence to explore the aerospace industry because I realized that, I could use programs like RockSim to design a new fin shape and, test it out with different types of rocket bodies. And so I got really, really excited about space in seventh grade. And that summer, I applied for a 1 week free summer program at NASA Goddard Center, which is in Maryland, around, I guess, like an hour away from my house. And it was called NASA Goddard Center Sisters Program. And it was for middle school girls. And I somehow got into that program. And I spent a week at NASA just learning about scientists, meeting with scientists, visiting all their laboratories. And I just fell in love with space. And seeing the diversity in the organization at NASA as well, I just knew that this was the type of place I wanted to work in the future. And so at that moment, like going into eighth grade, I knew I wanted to be in space. I realized how fortunate I was to have a middle school rocketry club because not everybody has this experience that can provide them the confidence to go into space. And so in 8th grade, I kind of had a pivotal moment where I founded an organization, which I'll get into a little bit later. But going into high school, I had this developing passion for biology and space. And I was going into like 10th grade, kind of into 11th grade. And I was like, thinking about colleges, thinking about what I'm going to apply for. And I was like, I don't want to apply for engineering and I don't want to apply for biology because those two are not exactly what I'm interested in. I want something together. Like I don't know what that is. And so randomly, you won't even believe it. I just searched up on the internet space medicine and put two words that I love together. And I realized it was a real career. Like you could actually become an aerospace physician. There was aerospace medicine residency programs. Like you could literally become a doctor, but for space and for astronauts.
Wow.
And so at that moment, I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I've been like seeking opportunities ever since that related to this career.
So that Google search happened when?
Like I want to say like end of 10th grade.
10th grade, and you're like, done. That's exactly it. I need to
That's what
do
I'm
that.
gonna do.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. So such a young age. You had your teacher, Mr. Anderson, right? Did I say that? Yep. He basically showed you that there is a path to get more involved. And from that, you were able to further explore your passions there and see that, hey, this is something I can actually do. Wonderful. I mean, wow. And so then that was 7th grade that this whole thing started. 8th grade, you started Ignited Thinkers. Now,
Yes.
talk to us about Ignited Thinkers. You're the founder and CEO of Ignited Thinkers.
Yeah, IgnitedThinkers is a nonprofit organization to spread space education to students around the world. And it's a pretty big goal, I guess. But in 8th grade, I was on a rocket launch. It was my first big rocket that couldn't be launched at the back of my middle school because it was too big and there's like an airport nearby. So I had to kind of drag my parents along to a rocket launch site. And I remember on the car ride back, this is the first time my parents have ever seen me launch a rocket. And they were just mind blown that I was doing this because they had no clue what I was doing in a rocketry club. They just thought I was building rockets, but not actually flying them, or they just didn't know. And so when they saw that, they were so excited. And my dad said something that really changed my perspective. He said, Gitika, you're so lucky at the age of 13 to have the opportunity to build and fly a model rocket. I mean, I'm 41 and I never had the opportunity to do that. And so I bet, kids even in India and other parts of the world just don't have this opportunity. You're so lucky. And so at that moment, it just clicked and it was like, you're right. I had this really privileged experience of having a rocketry club that really pushed me to pursue an aerospace career. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't have even explored the industry. I would have just had that curiosity and it would have gone somewhere else. And so I was really privileged. And so I founded Ignited Thinkers to provide this middle school rocketry club experience I had to every other student around the world. And so our target audience is K through 12, and we have free workshops, free webinars, a YouTube channel where we highlight diverse space champions around. I think we've done over 100 individuals, from government officials, people who've worked with the presidents of the United States, NASA government officials, astronauts, a lot of people from Blue Origin, and so different companies, and really just highlighting their unique backgrounds to show people that space is for everyone. And also I'm trying to work with different counties across the country to provide hands-on kits to classrooms and to kind of break down that barrier in classrooms, because just having an organization where students come in, that's also an accessibility, like there's still a boundary for that. Like you need to have the resources and interest for space to get into it. And so I wanted to go into classrooms and make an impact. So I'm trying to work with different school systems to provide these kits and work with museums to create hands-on programming related to space by students for students. And so that's what Ignited Thinkers really is about. And so ever since 8th grade, it's been a journey to try figuring out how to do this. And there's still a long way to go, but that's what Ignited Thinkers is.
That is unbelievable that you're able to do that. And I mean, at such a young age, and to realize your, opportunity that was so unique, that is so great, and giving back in that way, and also opening so many doors for so many people. It sounds like you're not just, pulling information off of a Wikipedia page. You're actually making serious introductions, and building a solid network of people there. That is so valuable. Unbelievable. What would you say that some of the most proud moments that you've had in this organization are, of something you've accomplished, or obviously you can be proud about all of it, but what's one thing that sticks out to you and says, wow, I'm so glad that this has been done?
Yeah, I think there's two main things. I think the first one is around like last year in October, I went to an event called Aim Higher in Atlanta, Georgia, where Ignited Thinkers was a collaborator. And there was this huge earthwork that was done of Stephanie Wilson, an astronaut, the second, she is the African American woman who had the most flights into space. And she's not as like recognized as some of the other astronauts like Dr. Mae Jemison. And we created this huge earthwork of her in Atlanta. And we were a collaborator for having this live stream for kids in classrooms in Atlanta to talk about space. And there was this young girl who came to the Georgia Tech, it was at Georgia Tech, like this other event in Atlanta. And so at Georgia Tech, there was a little girl who came up to me and she was saying, I'm so inspired by what you're doing and who you are. I want to be like you when I grow up. I saw the live stream and I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. And when she said that, it was just like the best thing of my life because it just to know that like I impacted someone. It's so cliche, I feel like everyone says this, but also just experiencing it myself of me making an impact to someone and how like the video I did really did change someone's perspective was just such a great moment for me. And so that was really a big moment for me. And for Ignited Thinkers, another big thing that I'm proud of is the work that we're doing recently. I never had a board of directors before because I didn't really know how a nonprofit is supposed to work. And so I've been doing a lot of research over the years and I realized you needed like a governance team. And my Girl Scouts experience, I'm actually the team board of director for Girl Scout Nation's Capital. And so that experience enabled me to figure out how a nonprofit is really supposed to work. And so I've been trying to form a team. We got a board of directors together earlier this year and coming up with like a strategic plan for what we want to achieve in the coming annual year. And so just having this like vision for what the organization needs to be, I think is a big step, and continuously making this organization not just me, but more of a team is something that I'm really proud of.
Definitely, definitely. And where do you see this organization going in the future?
Yeah, my long-term vision is to create like a contest for K through 12 students to participate from their schools to like form teams and to take part in different interdisciplinary competitions related to space policy, space art, space medicine, space biology, astrophysics, photography, astronomy, just like take part in these different aspects of space and a collaborative competition among students around the world. And we're actually doing a smaller version of this contest in the coming year with Janet the Planet. She's the president of the board of directors at Humans to Mars. And also she's like board of directors for National Space Society. And she's very active in space. And also SEDS, which is a student-led organization across the world. We're working with SEDS USA to hold this competition for K through 12 students and like a smaller version. And hopefully we can kind of build up to a big, large global competition that can take place where, millions of students can take part in and, have this free space to explore in their schools. And we provide the resources to them to take part in this competition.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, I am so excited for the day that happens because it will happen. You are one driven individual. It is so amazing. So I'm just so impressed. What would you say from these experiences you've had with Ignited Thinkers? What would you say some of your biggest challenges have been?
Yeah, the biggest one is, in the beginning, I told you that neither of my parents are in the aerospace industry. So for me, when I had this idea in eighth grade, it was about making it a reality and forming that community, because this was an idea that a lot of people have a lot of space organizations, but something that makes Ignited Thinkers different is we're working from like K through 12 group. Like not a lot of organizations are focused on the younger student population. And, for me, it was like, how do I make this a reality? Like, how do I make this idea a reality? And so I remember I reached out to, I think, over 50 space organizations, like cold emails, like, this is my idea. This is what I want to do. Can I have your support? And I got 2 responses back. And I was so excited. That was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I was so glad that they responded. And I collaborated with them and I did like a webinar series with them and started to build my network and the community, because I'm a strong believer that you can't achieve everything by yourself. You need to build that team. And so that's what I've been working towards. And the biggest thing was getting that response and like building that credibility. When you don't have people or network already in the industry, it's hard to get people to believe in your vision and like believe that this is real and this is something that you want to do. And so for me, it was like about building that network that was so hard. And the biggest lesson that I learned was you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I've been playing basketball since like third grade. And so I think this quote like really resonated with me, which was, if I don't even take the shot, then no one is ever going to like even know who I am. But if I
Right.
take the shot and I ask them, then I even like it's a 50-50, it could go in or it doesn't go in. But the worst that happens if they don't like they just don't respond. That's the worst case scenario. They just don't respond to me. And so, like, what's the harm in that? And so, once I internalized that, I started sending like a billion emails. I connected with everyone on LinkedIn, connected with everyone on Twitter, and just built that community and network. And people are so open once they start learning about your vision.
That is unbelievable advice. I think everybody should really rewind to this part of the episode and listen to that again because it is so important. You do miss 100% of the shots that you do not take. So, gosh, and for you to learn that again at such a young age, I'll stop prefacing it because you've probably heard it a million times yourself, but it is impressive. Um, and I guess the last question on Ignited Thinkers that I have for you here is, what do you feel like you have most gained from this experience? As somebody who's going into space, as somebody who sees their future there, what do you feel this has brought you most?
Yeah. I think that there's the biggest thing that I got through Ignited Thinkers was a community and uplifting network. Through the YouTube channel, I've met so many incredible individuals who supported Ignited Thinkers, but also my own career path. I've got a lot of my mentors, like Dr. Fogarty, Mr. Courtney Stad. Dr. Fogarty was the first female NASA chief scientist for human research at NASA Johnson Space Center, and now she works at Baylor College of Medicine. But also Mr. Courtney Stad, he was the former White House chief of staff, and those two are some of my most incredible mentors who they have Zoom calls with me like every month, just talking about like my career, what I want to do, and like just advice for Ignited Thinkers. They're on my board of directors, and so I think for me it was building that community was so important. And through Ignited Thinkers, it was a great way to meet people who understand what I want to do with my future and with Ignited Thinkers. And so the biggest thing was getting that community and getting the mentorship.
Definitely. Wow. Community is everything. That is unbelievable. Well, I want to talk about this next experience that you've had because you are also you are the vice chair of the Children's Science Center Youth Advisory Board. So this is another nonprofit. Talk to us a little bit about this and tell us how you got involved in this organization.
Yeah, so the Children's Science Center is a nonprofit focused on spreading STEM education to students across Northern Virginia. And so, being in Northern Virginia my whole life, I've known about the Children's Science Center, and it's a great interactive experience for younger students to learn about STEM and to just get engaged with STEM. And I know they have a youth advisory board where there's around 30 students who can get involved in creating like real change in Northern Virginia. Talking with students, working with students, and creating projects with the support of the Children's Science Center. And so going into, I believe I joined in 10th grade, I applied to be a part of their youth advisory board, and I was selected through this interview application, and I immediately fell in love with all the work that they're doing. They really reach out to schools, communities, and they're working towards creating this large museum. I think it was $200 million. They got $200 million in funding by Virginia to build this museum in Loudoun County. It's this gigantic museum. And so, being a part of the Youth Advisory Board, I was given the opportunity to contribute to this museum, to kind of talk about my experiences as a younger kid, like what intrigues me about a STEM museum. And so, really just contribute in those aspects. And the following year, I applied to be on the leadership team of the Youth Advisory Board and was selected as a vice chair, where I'm responsible for kind of managing the teams and creating new events that we can take part in. And so it really was an incredible experience for me to contribute to this nonprofit, again, learn about what a nonprofit does, and carry this experience back to Ignited Thinkers as well.
Right. And so are you still working with this on the youth advisory board?
So you can only be a part of the youth advisory board when you're in high school. And so I was until I'm still on the youth advisory board, but I'm passing my position along to the next year because I'm graduating high school. But I actually found a few collaborations within the Children's Science Center with Ignited Thinkers. So I told you that they were building a museum. And so we're planning on working with them because I was able to foster these connections, and they were very excited about Ignited Thinkers to have hands-on programming that Ignited Thinkers conducts for their museum. So I'm still connected with them, I'm still tied with them, but just in a different form now.
Right. That was actually my next question. I'm glad you brought that up. So you have been able to find these parallels between the two, obviously learning how to run your nonprofit, but also finding these collaborations that allow you to continue making an impact together. So now you're able to provide, say it again, it was hands-on programming to the students that go to their museum. Is that correct? How does that
Yes,
look? What
yeah.
does that program look like for a student?
Yeah, so we're still kind of in the planning phase because their museum is not fully constructed yet. It's planned to be fully constructed in another 2 years. And so I'm very excited for that. But they have four parts to their museum titled different things like flow, solar, and they have like these different parts of their museum. And so, kind of in the flow section, they have a lot, or in solar section too, they have like space exhibits related to like planets and planetary science. And so with Ignited Thinkers, what we're planning to do is once those exhibits are finalized of what they're going to look like, creating like these easy, accessible, activities, whether it be with clay or like a small activity, small kits that they can purchase from the museum, just have things available for students there so they can, you know, not only just read what's on the exhibit, but then apply it into their own life by having a small activity. And so that's kind of where Ignited Thinkers comes in, because as students ourselves, I think we can understand other students. And so that's something that makes Ignited Thinkers a little bit different.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's tremendous that you're able to do that. And so what do you feel like from that? Like you gave an example of a clay model that you're building. I'm curious about the models too, because I'm still a little kid at heart. So what what would that model be like in terms of the exhibit?
Yeah, so like simple things, like for example, like if something related to planets, kind of modeling what those different sizes would look like in retrospect. Like if this is, the moon, this is the Earth, like how big would the sun be, like in clay? And so
Oh,
just kind of
gotcha.
having that like that modeling, and also, for example, there's like not that you can bake bread or have bread, but you can create like sourdough bread mixture in like a museum, and you can take it home and see how it stays over 48 hours. The sourdough bread basically creates bacteria, right? And in Mars and other extreme planets, there could potentially be life that could be like microorganisms or bacteria. And so through this sourdough experiment, the students can understand how life forms, how bacteria forms, and how could this like lead to like human development or other organism development.
Wow.
And so just like simple activities that could do with food, could do with like daily supplies, just kind of turn it into something a little bit bigger so students can visualize and have like a token of memory from the museum.
Definitely. So this is digging back into your childhood, your experience at the museums, and now you're in this position to actually create what's in the museum, which is so cool.
Yeah.
How do you feel? What are some of the most fun experiences you've had in a museum, and how do you think they've impacted the way that you would like to, change or improve upon what current museums have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think my favorite experiences, so in the Air and Space Museum, they used to have all these model astronauts or like templates of astronauts where you can put like your head in. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where you can
Yeah,
like put
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Uh-huh.
like you can put your head into like these different things and imagine yourself as an astronaut. Or they would have these little rides that you could do. Like it makes you feel like you're in like a spaceship, even though you're not. And there was like these virtual like movie screens where you could envision what it would be like to be on a different planet, and just like really cool things like that. And it really inspired me to be intrigued with space as a younger kid. I actually have a picture of me like mimicking an astronaut that was like right behind me, like a model one. And it was just like so like I have it like all over my social media because I'm like, I just knew from like 8 years old I wanted to be an astronaut, I guess, because it's just like those moments like that. I think it really impacts you somewhere and it makes you want to go to space. So I think it's those hands more than just reading what was on like the exhibit. For
Mhm.
me, it was those experiences where I could visualize things and visualize myself to look like something was really exciting for me. So I think kind of replicating that would be very fun.
Wow, very cool. Well, Githika, we're going to take a quick break. I'm super excited to dig more into your path. This is unbelievable what you've been able to do so far. And we'll be right back shortly. All right. So we were just talking about all that you're doing with Ignited Thinkers, all that you're doing to collaborate with, the nonprofit that you were just associated with that recently just raised $200 million for a new museum in Virginia. That is going to be unbelievable. I want to talk to you a little bit now about how you were able to balance so much in your high school, because it's a lot. It's a full-time job to run an organization. To be on the board of another is also a big time commitment. We haven't gotten into all of your experiences yet either. So you still had to perform, you still had to get your good grades. You played basketball, like you said. So what did you do to be so effective in your time management? That's a really huge key for all students.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And for me, there was a lot of times where it would get overwhelming. It's hard to balance both like school and then college applications and then testing and all of that stuff that kind of comes into applying for college. And so for me, the biggest thing was making sure I had my priorities straight in terms of the clubs I joined, because a lot of times I noticed in high school, a lot of students want to join every club related to every single field. Like they're going to join a computer science club, they're going to do debate, they're going to do MUN, they're going to do every science club, every volunteering club. And I'm like, do you want to go into like science or like humanities, or what are you interested in? People just, it's hard for some people to figure that out, and it's completely fine. But if you do have kind of a goal of this is the type of field I want to go into, I would recommend that you don't join the other clubs that don't relate necessarily to your career field. Personally, from my opinion, it's great to have those experiences, but if you're really invested in one topic, for me, that's a choice I chose to take. Is instead of joining, I tried debate, I didn't really like it, but I joined debate. And for me, I made that personal choice of sticking with the clubs that I was truly interested in, like a few clubs related to STEM and science in specific, because that was what I was interested in,
Mhm.
and space clubs, and then didn't do the rest. And so for me, it was making those priorities. And sometimes I wouldn't be in the same clubs as my friends, but that's just like a choice I chose to make, because then I wouldn't be wasting my time doing other things I wasn't interested in. And
Definitely.
also, like when I come home, like I'm the type of person who like I take a break, but not really. So I like kind of like right when I come home, I have a plan of what I want to do. And I'm like a very type A person, I think. So I have a schedule of like, this is what I want to accomplish this week, and this is what I want to do this day. And if I don't get it done, I'm going to reschedule it, but it has to be done this week. Like, so if I keep pushing it off, I'm going to keep procrastinating. So I tell myself like it's due 2 days in advance. So I always tell myself like what I need to do in advance, so I kind of like have the pressure of I need to get it completed tonight. So I gave myself earlier deadlines so I get things done. And so for me, that's like the biggest thing of making sure you like plan what you need to do every day, and you can have breaks in between as long as you know you're going to finish whatever you told yourself you're going to finish. And having that balance is like important. And I know it comes different to everyone, but the biggest thing for me was just planning that schedule of what my week would look like,
Right.
and pre-planning deadlines so I wouldn't do it actually the day it was actually due.
Right. Wow. So how or when did you start to get into that habit? Because I can think of a couple of times that I probably tried to push something earlier, and maybe I was like, oh, wow, that was great. But then I fall right back into the same routine of, oh, it's due this day and I'm falling behind. Maybe my break was too long. So, how did you stick to that pattern and reinforce it over time?
I actually like did this ever since I was like in sixth grade. Like it was something
Oh,
that
cool.
was just always there for me. Like I would get my homework done really fast so I could do whatever I want for the rest of the day. And so for me, it was kind of like not something I forced myself to do, but I think it came a little bit naturally because I am the type of person to like put pressure on myself to get things done. If I don't, it's just going to keep going away, and it will never be done even in 2 months. So for me, I have to give myself those harsh deadlines, and so
Yeah.
it's been something I've done ever since like sixth grade. Like it's just always been
Oh,
there.
yeah, no, that makes more sense than if you've been doing it since sixth grade, why you can continue to do it for so long. Definitely. I think that's a great trait to get into, or great trait to have. I guess for students that are trying to figure out their best patterns, you know, some people like to procrastinate at the end.
Exactly.
Works for them, but how did you, how were you able to maintain that quality of work even with an earlier deadline? Did you feel like that was ever an issue?
Yeah, it was stressful sometimes. I'm never gonna say it was so easy, but sometimes I would have to skip that like basketball meeting or not go to that like because I tried to be active, but it's hard to be active when you have so much work. So kind of like, okay, I'm not gonna go to the gym this week, or make that sacrifice of like, oh, I'm not going to take part in this club, and tell my teammates like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm unable to do this week, I'll work on it next week. Kind of, I think, making like prioritizing like, okay, this is number one for me, this is number two, this is number three. And for me, always it was like school first, Ignited Thinkers, and then it was like all the other clubs that came after. So for me, I always prioritize like those two first, and that's why I was able to get things done. In terms of your question of like how I maintain that quality, I don't know. That's a tough question. I think I would just it would be rushful. Like I remember school, I would get work done in school too. I'm the type of person like I will do my homework in class. Like
Yeah.
I'm that type of person. I'm that one
Yeah.
girl who will do that. So
You're like,
I
look
can't.
up, I'm talking. You're like, I've read that chapter. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like, and for me, I think high school pro tip, like textbooks don't help me. Like for me, I always watch like the really like fast paced, like crash course videos on YouTube, and they helped me a lot. So for me, it was like finding those studying strategies that would help me. And for me, reading a textbook that was like 300 pages just wouldn't help me learn. And it wouldn't get material into my head. So I would just watch those like crash course videos and do the homework really well, that it just would help me. So I guess just finding those right studying strategies so that it becomes faster for you, and for like studying for exams and stuff. Like for me, once I found that strategy, it was like I wouldn't spend hours on homework and stuff.
Right. No, that's great. You know, it's funny because I was actually the opposite. I loved the textbook. I was like, if I
Really?
can read everything in this textbook, I'm going to be so good. And it was actually sometimes to my disadvantage because I'd read more about things that weren't really relevant. But I did enjoy learning. So, but nonetheless, I really like that. That's great advice. But yeah, each person has their own strategy, and you've obviously, been working to find yours, and it sounds like you found something that works. So with that, I want to kind of transgress into something else that you've been able to do a lot more of recently. I think within the last couple of weeks, but talk to us about your speaking experiences, because this is, again, going into your passion for space, your passion for inspiring others, teaching others, giving them that opportunity. So you recently just spoke at the National Space Society International Space Development Conference. I saw they had a nice acronym, so you didn't have to say every single word. But also the Humans to Mars Summit. So break these down for us. For someone like myself who has never been to one of these conventions, talk to us about what they're like. What's the energy there? How is everything, unfolding, and your speaking experience as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I cannot stress the fact of how important a network and community really is. LinkedIn has helped me so much to develop that network and connect with individuals and maintain those relationships. I wouldn't just connect with them, but I would foster those, like that communication line. I would send them emails, and I would always try to be like kind of on top of their minds of like, this is what I'm doing. Can you help me out? Sort of like maintain that relationship. And so for me, ninth, 10th, 11th grade, and 12th grade was all focused around maintaining those relationships. So it took a long time. I was never invited to a conference to speak before that. And I never even attended conferences because they cost a lot of money. Like I think one ticket, sometimes like $500, even $1,000 sometimes. So it's definitely like very pricey to go. And usually companies sponsor for their employees to go. So for me, it was just something not like appropriate as a student to go, I felt. So I just never like looked into conventions at this age. But my network. Okay, so for the first summit that I went to was Humans to Mars Summit, which took place in Washington, D.C. And there was a lady, Kim Macharia, who lives in New York City, and she is just so big in the industry because she knows like everyone. And she texted me and was like, she's just purely like someone that I know as like a connection. Like we've worked together before, we've done a webinar together, we both are interested in space, but like that's what our relationship is. Like I don't know her outside of that. And she just texted me and she was like, Gitika, I have this speaking opportunity that I'm not able to attend because I'm going to be stuck in a flight. Could you go? Because I know you're in Washington, D.C. Can you go talk about girls in space and Space Prize and be a Space Prize ambassador? And Space Prize is this nonprofit organization. And I was like, of course, 100%. I'll talk about Space Prize. I'll talk about IgnitedThinkers. I'll talk about diversity in space. And I, of course, jumped at the opportunity. I actually had 2 AP exams that morning. So I remember I took 2 AP exams and then drove to DC like an hour after to go take it, to go talk. So that was definitely a stressful day for me, but it was
Uh,
so worth it because I spoke right before NASA Deputy Administrator Pamela Melroy. I was supposed to speak before Bill Nelson, who is the NASA administrator, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. So, but still, just as cool. It was like a woman leader in space. And so it was very cool to speak before her about why diversity in space matters, talk about my story in space, and then talk about what I'm doing with IgnitedThinkers. So that was a powerful experience. And so many people were very excited. It's such a high energy room. Like all these conferences, I noticed everyone is so passionate about what they're doing in space, and they have such a vision for the future, and they're really working towards it. And it just makes it seem more realistic to go to space or to have humans on Mars, and just have that conference experience was really, really cool. And then a few days afterwards, everybody's telling Kim how they really enjoyed my talk and my presentation and just, what I did at the conference. And a few days later, ISDC was coming around and she was like, Gitika, I also can't speak at this conference because she's a very busy person. So in one of her like flights got moved. She was on a 0G flight experience for
Oh,
another
cool.
nonprofit she was a part of. Yeah. And so it got moved because of weather. And she was like, I can't make it. Could you speak at ISDC? I was like, of course, I'll speak at ISDC. And so I spent 3 days. I spoke at two of them, and I met a lady who I already knew at that conference from a virtual introduction on LinkedIn, and she invited me to talk with her on her talk as well. So I ended up doing like 3 talks that day over like that conference, and it was just so cool because just talking about space medicine, space, and my story as well with others was so exciting. And every talk that I went to was incredible because everybody had such a niche passion in space. Space is so big, and there's so much in the industry, from space policy, international relations, to like the food nutrition, food scientists. So just hearing what they're doing to make us prepare to go to Mars was incredible. So those conferences are definitely once in a lifetime experience, and now they're inviting me to come back to more. So it's very exciting to have that opportunity, and it's all via connections. So networking
That
is
is
very important.
unbelievable. Wow, unbelievable. And just, getting up there, speaking about things that you're passionate about, learning from other people. I saw a couple of the posts that you had made on LinkedIn about that and how great the people that you'd met were. That to me is so fascinating because like you said it best, this is such a big field and there's so many things in this field that somebody can really dive into. Um, and it's so new. And I think that newness of it, how does that affect the energy of people? Because from what you're describing, it doesn't sound very coming at your neck. It sounds more, let me bring you into my circle and let's work together and actually get there together. So could you touch on that a little bit? Because I think that's that collaboration brings, humanity to a new level.
Yeah, I was listening to this one talk that I want to like start off with, which he was saying how when he was in school, people would ask him, did he want to go into typewriting class or take a computer science class? And everyone in the school said, take the typewriting class, you're going to get a job. Who cares about computer science? And keep this in mind, this was like decades ago. And so he was saying when he was young, he had 4 kids in his school chose to take computer science, and the rest took a typewriting class. And him and Warren Buffett, they both were in the same school, and they both were they were the 2 out of 4 kids who chose computer science. The rest of the kids chose typewriting. And he was saying now computer science is like the big thing. Like typewriting is long gone. And he says that's what aerospace is. Right now, people look at aerospace as something very like unrealistic, kind of small, not as important, but that's the future. And that's what's going to grow, because everything that we're doing today, from talking today, it's all space technology that makes it possible, and it's starting to become more like relevant in our daily lives, and it's giving us opportunities to explore things in a very unique environment, which tells us so much about Earth, tells us about our human bodies better. And so
Yeah.
space is the new frontier. And there's like an estimate by these different economists saying like right now, a lot of billionaires are investing into this industry, and it's like its outlook is supposed to be like a $1.4 trillion industry in the next 10 years. And so just
Wow.
knowing that this is going to be one of the biggest industries, and how in the future they're looking to commercial to the public, is so exciting. So many jobs are going to increase in this industry. You can combine literally any career and put it in aerospace, like computer science, art, food, policy, journalism, literally anything. And I bet you'll find a career in aerospace, and it's going to be one of the big things in the future. Even space defense, like even with the Russia-Ukraine attacks, space technology has been critical to understand what's been happening with this and how to help Ukraine in the situation. And so just to know that space technology and what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX is so relevant to not just political affairs, but in our daily lives, just shows that this industry is going to be something that's the next frontier. And we are all like the pioneers of the industry, because it's not that big. It's not as big as AI. It's not as big as other industries that have been there for a long time. And so knowing that this is something that's expanding, more funding is being put into this, and things are starting to pick up, really shows how like we, it's important. This is like a very new, fresh industry. So it's important that we like invest in it and have energetic, enthusiastic individuals, which is why everyone in the aerospace industry is so welcoming and opening, because they want to prepare this next generation, because they're the ones who are going to be really taking this an even bigger level than what it already is right now.
Wow. That is one of the most remarkable things that I've seen from it. Not that I'm nearly involved in it as much as you. I'm literally an armchair reader, but just seeing even what you're doing, like, you just had a call the other week with a young fourth grader, and to see you giving back to generations as one of the, almost the, a requirement or a requisite of a successful initiative within this field. I think that continual generational, like that generational investment that is so, wow. I mean, I don't have words for that. That is just incredible to see that happening. So I'm really excited to see all the things that you're able to do. I'm excited to see all the things that the industry will be able to do. And you spearheading that is unbelievable. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your research as well. You've done a couple of really cool projects. And again, it is hard to get research as a high school student. You have done this now, I think, 2 or 3 times. You've done some research at NASA, you've done some research at Brown, and you've done some research at Central Florida. And all of those have great, I mean, obviously it speaks for themselves, great programs to do research regarding space. So what was your favorite research project that you worked on? What one really captivated you?
It was 100% the NASA Ames Research Center internship. And it was my first real experience in the industry to work on, space medicine type research. It was all about space biology. And so my research was focused on understanding how Drosophila, which are common fruit flies, these tiny little bugs, how their cardiovascular system behaved in space, and how it differed from how it behaved on ground control, which is just on Earth, and to understand like what happened to their genes in these two different environments, and what genes were behaving abnormally, like what was abnormally upregulated and what was abnormally downregulated. And so understanding those different genes, and these really tiny fruit flies actually have 75% of the same cardiovascular diseases as humans and genes that are conserved, which is crazy to know that Drosophila's cardiovascular system is so similar to humans. And then what we did is we figured out a few genes that were abnormally behaving in space, found the human paralog to that. So like, what is the human version of this fruit fly gene, and figured out, is there any research about what's happening to this gene in humans in space? Are astronauts being affected? And we came up with a proposal for NASA to be able to test what was happening to the cardiovascular system in space, and potentially trying to cover a knowledge gap that we have in medical understanding. So we found these few genes that were related to muscle contraction. So like how fast the muscle was beating, or like how fast the heart was beating. And we found that some of these genes were very abnormally behaving in space in these fruit flies. So we were curious to see, has there been any research on how heart contracts in space? And could this relate to any long-term diseases that we still haven't uncovered in some of the astronauts who have flown in space? And so research like this is so important as we look into trying to go to Mars and go to longer, further distances with humans, and trying to figure out what really happens to our body in space. Because, there's a lot of things that happen that we don't even understand. And a lot of astronauts face lots of consequences once they come back to Earth. So it's about understanding those. And so NASA really provided me that experience to dive deeper into that intersection.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And so I guess when you're looking at the astronauts then that have come back down, what were you able to find from that? Did you find a lot of issues that could arise, or what did that look like in those findings? Or is the research still ongoing?
We have not, NASA does not have ability to really get the human, like human genes and understand the human genes. They don't have that data. We only have the data from the animals and like insects like fruit flies and rats and mouses, because those are easier to
Right.
like experiment on. There's less ethical regulations. And with humans, it's a lot more difficult. So we don't actually know what happens to those human organs yet. This is just a proposal that during my internship I put forth, saying like these are the genes that could be impacted in humans' heart, and we are curious of what really happens to them in space. And so this is our research proposal. If you provide us $10,000 in funding, we will tell you the answer. And we unfortunately got like second place, I think, in the competition, so we didn't get the $10,000 funding, but it was still a really cool experience to try going through that like analytical process of trying to figure out. And some of the research that this one, what I did didn't apply, but some of the research that you do about what happens to humans in space can be applied to humans on Earth. For example, when you're in space, you're in microgravity, so you don't have gravity and you're basically floating, so you're not using your bones anymore. And we don't use your bones, what happens? You have a lot of bone degradation. And so when you have this bone degradation that happens, it happens very fast in space. But down here on Earth, bone degradation is a long period, and a lot of the older population in the world has a lot of bone degradation, but it's a very slow process. So
Mhm.
understanding how it happens very quickly in space and identifying key genes could help us uncover some genes that are involved in bone degradation on Earth that we may not have known before. So it's about like using this new environment we have to learn scientifically about gene behavior that we would not understand on Earth, which has gravity. So just kind of removing that element of gravity to understand the human body can help us uncover a lot of things about, what happens on Earth. And more specifically, there was this research experience I recently got into the past week with Columbia Medical School, and they're doing a lot of research on radiation and what happens to a lot of exposed radiation in space to the human body. And this could help us improve cancer treatments on Earth because radiation leads to cancer. So understanding these different, I guess, intersections can be very exciting. And personally, as a aerospace physician, I don't think it's about just helping astronauts, but translating that research into helping humans on Earth. And that unique experiment, that like the unique platform space gives you, is something that you can't get on Earth.
Right. Wow. And the next kind of question I have to dig into that more is, when you are now kind of faced with this bottleneck that says, okay, we need this data from humans in space, how do you start to get that? Do you just need to have more people in space, or what are the steps in order to understand really the implications there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of like tissues and organs that are, that are in research places that you can purchase. Like NASA has access to a lot of laboratories to purchase these human tissues and organs to research on. It's not something accessible to a lot of institutions because they're very rare and you want to conserve them properly. And so for these organs to be accessed for research, it's very difficult and it's a lot of money. Like they cost a lot of money. But you can replicate what happens in space on Earth. It's not as perfect, but there are micro G simulated environments on Earth that you can get. You can have like analog missions, which are like very isolated places where they try to mimic how it would be like to be on Mars, to be on the moon, and kind of experiment how that would be like on Earth. So there are like like platforms like that where they try to stimulate what it's like to be in space, but it's not the real thing. So for research purposes, you can use these environments that are like the clinostat and stuff that are like provide the micro G experience you want in space on Earth. And so there are things like that. It's fine for academia purposes, but it's not the real deal, I guess. So
Right. Well, that'll be exciting to see how that particular
plays
aspect
out.
evolves as well. But it is neat that you can do it during the time, or on Earth. But
Something interesting that I want to quickly add is in
yeah.
2030, the International Space Station is retiring. And so there are three space stations, commercial space stations by like Blue Origin, Axiom, that are being sent to space. And hopefully humans on Earth can go live in these space stations, but they're hoping to dedicate parts of this to academia research. So that kind of answers your question.
Oh yeah, no, that's unbelievable. So three more will be sent up by when?
Their aim is like another 8-10 years. So 2030 is kind of like their goal, like
That's so
2032.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So we could talk about space all day. I mean, we could have so many questions, but I do want to get back to your path now about you're going to Columbia in the fall. And I'm curious about what decisions drove you to Columbia and what it was like making that selection. What about Columbia stood out to you most?
Yeah, there are many incredible colleges that I was very fortunate to be accepted to. And it was a tough decision, but not really, to be honest. Columbia was just kind of the choice that I was like, it was very obvious for me. So I did have a few decisions. One of the programs that I was really debating on between Columbia was the RPI Physician Scientist program. So it's Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and it's a direct 7-year BSMD program. So it's like an accelerated BSMD program. So I just got into their medical school and undergraduate. So I wouldn't even have to go through the whole medical school process to get in. I would just be in their program and be an MD in 7 years, and then doing like an aerospace medicine residency, and then be done. So it's a lot quicker. But I chose to go with Columbia because of there's a lot of reasons, but I think there's two main. One is Columbia, I'm a Davis Scholar in their school, which means I'm part of their CUSP Scholars Program, where I get to have this incredible experience as one of their scholars and talk with really incredible professionals, have mentors, get stipends for research, get really cool internship experiences, and get that extra push from Columbia, which I thought was really I never expected that
That
at
is
all, let
unbelievable.
alone getting into Columbia was a big thing, and getting that experience was even bigger. So it was like a huge driving factor for me. The financial aid they gave me, because I was a scholar, they gave me great financial aid, something that like I could afford, and it wasn't like unaffordable. So, it was another driving factor. And also Columbia, I worked with Columbia Space Initiative team. Well, I didn't work with them, I didn't interview with them, and I really, really liked the work that they were doing. And so, going into Columbia, knowing that I could work with them in the future and for the next 4 years was very exciting for me. And I started researching about Columbia's professors, the opportunities they have, and just fell in love with the whole vibe of the school, because it's right in New York City. And there's a lot of opportunities when you're in a city. And growing up in Washington, D.C., I think it would be difficult to live in a place where it was more rural or suburban. So kind of from like a city to a city, I think it would be an easier transition for me. So I just, everything about Columbia is amazing. And I'm very excited for all the opportunities that they offered to all their students. And, really that's what drove me to Columbia.
That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. And when did that stand out as the school that you wanted to go to? Was it before the college application process or during, or when did that whole thing click
Yeah.
for you?
I did not think I would ever in a million years get into Columbia. I'm like not even joking. Like that wasn't a school. It was a school I applied to because it was so cool, but I didn't think I would get in because I didn't realize how big of a space program they really had. And they're like, I don't know. I just didn't think I would get in. I I feel like that's everyone. And so for me, I got a likely letter to. So during the beginning, I didn't really think about Columbia or getting in, but I got a likely letter to Columbia. So I got like a letter saying that I would be accepted to their school 4 weeks in advance to the actual decision of like Ivy Day. So before any of my other like real like top tier decisions came out, Columbia gave me that letter of like, oh, I'm going to be accepted as a Davis Scholar. And they started sending all this email of like, oh, this is what we do at Columbia. This is how you could fit in. And I just like during those 4 weeks, I just fell in love with Columbia, and more than I ever knew it. Like before Ivy Day and everything, I like knew that I was going to Columbia regardless of what other school I got into, because I fell in love during those 4 weeks with Columbia. So I think for me, it was during the process that I fell in love with it.
Definitely, definitely. And what would you say? I mean, we just talked on everything you've done during your high school time, but what key thing really made you feel like you deserved that, that you were able to accomplish that, um, and set you up for that success? What was the key thing that you think helped you accomplish it?
For me, the biggest thing was that having a spike and a passion and a long-term vision. I think a lot of students, when they apply for colleges, you don't need to have your whole life figured out. I think it's different for everyone. but something for me was knowing that I have like a long-term vision just opposed to getting a college degree. I wanted to do something with a college degree that was a lot bigger. And for me, like working with Ignited Thinkers and being like an active member in my community as like a leader and someone who is dedicated to community service, it wasn't something that I wanted to stop after getting into college or
Right.
stop after getting my degree from Columbia, which is, like very prestigious. But I didn't want to, like, I knew for me it was something always bigger. And I told myself, even if I didn't get into Columbia or other great schools, like I would still do it. So for me, it was like, I thought like I deserved to go to Columbia because of all the work that I've been doing to
Right.
help my community, and also know that I have a long-term vision of something a lot bigger to help humanity. I didn't want to just graduate college, but I had a bigger goal. So for me, it was just having that vision that made me feel that I deserved to go to Columbia.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, Gitika, we're gonna close this out now with the rapid fire round. I know I'm taking you over time on this, but we'll get into these questions and you just shoot back whatever answer comes to mind. Alrighty. So the first one, what is your favorite book?
This is a hard one, but I'd have to go with Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures?
Yes.
Oh, that's right. That's about the women mathematicians, correct?
Yes.
Or no, that we're working on the NASA. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. Most influential role model.
Dr. Mae Jameson, hands down, she's the first woman who went to space, African American woman who went to space, who's an engineer, a doctor, and a dancer. So all that she does and all that she accomplished is amazing. So I look up to her because she's the first doctor who went to space.
Oh my goodness. All right, who was your favorite teacher and what was your favorite grade?
Oh, it's a hard one. I would have to probably go with Mr. Anderson from 7th grade. And so that was like, he was my favorite teacher. But I also I had a teacher, Mrs. Malloy, in high school. She was my 10th and 11th grade teacher. I had her for 3 classes for AP Research, AP Bio, and AP Seminar. And so she's like my favorite teacher from high school, and she made my whole experience much better.
Oh my goodness, I love that. So we already talked about what you're most looking forward to at Columbia, but the next question, what would you say the most stressful part of being a student day in and day out is?
Trying to balance both your outside life as someone who wants to create change, and like work with others who are already in the industry, but also trying to remember you're still a student and you're still trying to have fun and still hang out with your friends, and kind of finding that balance, I think, is the hardest part.
Definitely. Who is your favorite person that you've ever studied with or bounced ideas off of?
It'd probably be my mom. Like I don't really, I'm more of like an individual studier. So like I don't really study with other people. Maybe that'll change when I go to college. But for me, like when I'm with my mom, we always like have these rides where we like drink Starbucks and we talk and we just like hang out. And I get like some of my best ideas when I talk with her. So I think I would say my mom.
Definitely. What would you say the most meaningful way for students to help and impact each other is?
I think the biggest thing is just to remember that, you're not like competition. A lot of high school students think that they're always competing with each other, but knowing that 2 or 3 people can be successful together is something that is really important to have in mind, and something that I learned in high school. So for me, just like be kind, because trying to be competitive with someone else is like only going to bring you down. So I think working to uplift each other and support each other together will make everyone happy and everyone successful, because it's not a competition. So just remembering that.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. The next question, what is your biggest hope to accomplish during your time on Earth? And I say Earth usually, but you're more solar system. So what is your biggest hope to accomplish during your time?
I hope to, like I said, be the first doctor on Mars.
And so tell us a little bit about that really quickly. What does that mean to be the first doctor on Mars?
Yeah, we are hoping to go to Mars within like 20 years, if not earlier, with Elon Musk's timeline. And we really hope to well, we've been to Mars, but have human presence on Mars, and hopefully develop some sort of sustainable base on Mars. And it's so important to have a physician who understands what happens to our human body in space and how can we take those precautionary steps. And so having a physician or a flight surgeon is going to be critical. Not necessarily on the first mission. If it's the first mission, that's great. I can make history. But if it's not the first mission, if we're going to have like a sustainable base on Mars, it's important to have those like physicians who are going to be there to have that scientific research and help the people who are on that planet. So at least just going once, I think would be very cool, and just experiencing that.
Oh my goodness. Can you go multiple times? Is it not going to take a whole lifetime?
And no, it doesn't take a whole lifetime, but I think it would be very difficult to convince NASA to take you there multiple times.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, what would you say your top piece of advice for those who are early in their educational journey is?
The biggest advice is like like I said this before, take 100% of the shots, because you miss 100% of the ones you don't take. And the biggest thing for me was always reaching out and building that network. And I didn't think like an astronaut would ever talk to me like in a million years, but it happened because I just asked and I just reached out. And sometimes I won't get a response, but I didn't lose anything off of sending that message, like maybe just like 5 minutes of my time, but that's it. But what if they did respond? And so if I keep trying and I keep reaching out, like I'm positive that they're going to get annoyed and respond to me at least at one time. So I always tell myself, like, just keep trying. And every advice that I would give to every student is just take every shot because nothing is impossible.
I love that. Well, Gitika, where can people continue to follow the work you're doing, keep up with what you're doing, learn from you? What's a great spot?
They can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, all at Gitika Gorthi, literally just my first and last name. And also keep up with what I'm doing with Ignited Thinkers on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram at Ignited Thinkers. It's one word. And also visit the Ignited Thinkers website, which is www.ignitedthinkers.org. Everything is very straightforward and simple, but on either platform, you'll find out like a lot of the updates of what we're doing and just keep up with our journey.
Well, go give her a follow on all of those. Gitika, thank you so much for coming on. This is such a pleasure. We've learned so much from you today. So excited to see what you're able to accomplish and look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an exciting conversation.